Skies of Arcadia is one of the finest RPGs on the Dreamcast. It's not often each element such as battle, story, visuals and sound come together to create a near perfect experience. The adventure begins with a mysterious girl being attacked by an airship. Our gang of heroes swoop in and save the girl, but stumble into a tale that spans generations and soon embark on a journey that encompasses the entire kingdom. Each battle plays out in a turn-based manner and presents the usual options to the player, such as basic attacks and utilizing items, but where it truly comes into its own is through the use of the spirit system. Each magic action within battle is beholden to the amount of spirit points you possess, and it all soon becomes a balancing act of trying to manage your points in the most efficient way possible. Throughout the adventure, you'll be encountering specific items that allow each character's abilities to grow and flourish, which ultimately culminates in an unstoppable force. Overall, the experience will generally last around 60 hours if you complete the generous amount of optional content as well, which makes Skies of Arcadia one of the most robust RPGs the system has to offer. Techromancer sees players jumping into larger-than-life mechs in order to battle it out across a series of stages. It provides the player several modes in which to do this, ranging from story to a multiplayer option, and what has to be the most challenging, the hero mode. Now, the narrative is actually quite good and conveys several stories depending on which character you choose. From the comical to the more emotional endings, all seem to come across a bit cliche at first, but each feels right at home when considering this is a game that focuses upon action. The first thing that will strike you about Techromancer is the vibrant and intense style it portrays. Each robot on the screen is so intricately designed and absolutely dominates the playing field with their fluid movements and attacks that light up the action in a mesmerizing fashion. Although not the most technically impressive, it's the way in which the game plays that helps Techromancer carve its visual grandeur. Each robot is stripped of its armor once taking damage and serves as an extra visual cue that adds to the realism of each encounter. All of the fights take place on a 3D plane, allowing players to rotate each environment, which also receives the same colourful and vibrant attention to detail. From blue skies to distant cities and destructible objects, they all help the on-screen action come to life in a way that many fighting games can only dream of. If you never got around to it and are willing to pay up the cash, Techromancer well and truly deserves a pickup. Power Stone 2 is one of the greatest multiplayer experiences of all time. It manages to improve upon every aspect its predecessor introduced and stands out as one of the best games on the system. It sees you and up to 4 players battling it out across various stages that all dynamically react as the fight progresses. It's not only your friends you need to be worried about, but environmental dangers such as falling meteorites and an ever-changing landscape as well. It results in each fight feeling increasingly chaotic and provides some of the best moments you'll have when playing with friends. To make it even more messy, there are 7 items known as Power Stones scattered throughout each stage. By collecting only 3 of them, your character will transform and possess new abilities for a brief period of time. It results in a frantic race to collect as many stones as possible in order to emerge as the winner. Naturally, there are several types of modes to take part in that all add a nice bit of variety to the gameplay, which makes it enjoyable when playing on your own as well. Power Stone 2 is by far one of the best games on the system, and in my opinion deserves a spot in each and every Dreamcast owner's collection. It's well known that the Dreamcast was the place to be when it came to fighting games. With the likes of Soul Calibur, Street Fighter and Project Justice, players were spoiled for choice when it came to choosing what to play. But one of the all-time greats on the system has to be Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Starting out life in the arcades, it was ported to the Dreamcast in a near-perfect fashion and presented all of the mayhem players had come to love, as well as a few extras that made it worthwhile. It's a team-based fighter that sees you choosing up to 3 characters to carry through until the end, switching between each of them and performing several combos that take advantage of this mechanic was the order of the day, and with it unleashing 56 characters from the Capcom and Marvel universes, the size of the cast allowed for so many different team combinations to be made up. Literally, there are over 1,000 possible combinations, which makes each encounter all the more exciting. Visually, it's a real looker as well, and presents each character in loving detail. Each of the backgrounds match them as well, which vary from from pirate ships to mountaintops and provide an interesting backdrop for each of the fights to take place upon. If you're a fan of fighting games, there is a chance you'll already have a copy, but if you've never tried it, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 represents the pinnacle of the genre and well and truly deserves a spot in your library as well. Mars Matrix shares much in common with the popular shooter Radiant Silvergun on the Sega Saturn. To some it might look rather dated, but when it comes down to it, gameplay is what matters, and Mars Matrix does not disappoint. There are absolutely no walls or meteor rocks to maneuver around, nor will touching enemies kill you, or even strip you of any of the weapons you've managed to acquire. Instead, you face off against bullets, and I mean lots of bullets. The only time your screen won't be soaked with bright blue or neon pink enemy fire is when your score is being tallied up at the end of each level, and you'll only ever see that with a little miracle work. It can be quite difficult, but the challenge it presents is half of the fun. If you can manage to keep up, the feeling of ducking and diving in between each projectile will never get old. Now it is a bit short, with only 6 stages included, but you'll be hard pressed reaching the end, and when coupling this with an arranged mode and the ability to tinker with the mechanics of your ship, the longevity of the experience is quite generous. Mars Matrix is a chaotic shooter, messy but concentrated, battering you with slab after slab of gunfire, but there's some great fun in this cruelty, delicately weaving through the expansive fields of bullets and unlocking dozens of genuinely incredible features. It will leave everybody's thumbs bleeding, no doubt, but it's a pain well worth tolerating for such excellence. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is based off the popular manga series of the same name and is primarily a fighting game, and an excellent one at that. Characters play very similar to other Capcom games in that they have an array of punches and kicks, special moves and a finite super ability that needs to be charged up through fighting in order to unleash a stronger attack upon the enemy. What really steals the show is the incredible story mode that's included. It manages to stay faithful to the events of the manga and even rewards you extra points for executing fights the same way they appeared in the source material. But JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is not just strictly a fighting game. Throughout the main mode there are several mini-games to advance the story, such as simple interactive story sequences where you must push a button much like Shenmue's QuickTime events, and there's also several unique mini-games with their own set of rules. Every one of them is delightful and engrossing as the last, and they keep shoving the story forward whilst providing entertainment in some of the most creative ways. This amount of diversity in its gameplay is something not often found in other fighting games and really helps the experience stand out. If you're a fan of similar games and are willing to drop the serious amount of cash on it, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has to be one of the best of its kind and in no way will disappoint. Illbleed is a rather unique survival horror that sees players taking on the role of a woman known as Eriko. She is one of several high school students that find herself competing for a cash prize after receiving an invitation to a newly opened horror theme park known as Illbleed. A reward of $100 million is offered to anyone who dares to enter and successfully reaches the end of the park. Several days pass, and having still not heard from her friends, this is where the game kicks off and the madness of the situation begins to unfold. The entire experience is essentially made up of several levels that all possess a variety of traps and obstacles for the player to overcome. The threat comes from avoiding a heart attack or bleeding out completely that the player must deal with when caught in a trap. Each of them are not easy to see with the naked eye and will likely jump out at you at the most unsuspected moments. This causes the character's stress levels to rise, and to counteract it you have access to a device known as the Horror Monitor. It allows you to locate traps and mark them for future reference. It offers a way to deal with the various enemies between you and the friends that you are hoping to locate. Although Illbleed is not without its flaws, in my mind it is still an enjoyable experience that is bound to satisfy fans of the genre. So if you're looking for a slice of horror on the Dreamcast and have already played Code Veronica to death, Illbleed is a great option. The Dreamcast is quite well known for the amount of incredible fighters that released on it. It really was a dream console for fighting fans, and with games like Project Justice, it's really hard to argue that fact. Developed by Capcom and released in 2001, Project Justice is the sequel to Rival Schools, which released on the original PlayStation back in '98. It manages to build upon the foundation that made the original so great, and continues on the tradition of being a team fighter, but instead of commanding a team of 2, the notch is now turned up to 3. It allows you to to execute devastating party-up attacks that see all three characters taking out your opponent in style. It also includes a pretty robust story mode that offers branching paths for your fighters due to various decisions you are greeted with throughout its duration. And to top it off, visually Project Justice is sublime, with the character models taking center stage. Each of them are intricately designed and offer a wealth of diversity when it comes to selecting which one to use. Matching this aspect of each of the locations you'll find yourself fighting in, an immense amount of detail is lent to each of them, which helps them all pop to life on the screen. From the vastness of a soccer stadium to the more intimate high school rooftops, there is plenty of variety which adds to the believability of each encounter. Although it's not the best fighter on the system by any means, Project Justice stands tall as not only a worthy sequel, but a great addition to the genre on the system. The Dreamcast was home to many incredible shooters, and soon became the console to own for fans of the genre, but one game that often got overlooked was GigaWing 2. It's hard to point to one single reason as to why this occurred, but the most common belief would be its difficulty that had the potential to turn many players away. It is a really hard game, but in my eyes, if you stick with it and get to grips with some of the more intricate aspects that make up its gameplay, it soon becomes one of the best in its class. The movements of the ships are incredibly smooth and responsive, and although some frame rate dips do occur when you're in the process of blowing the crap out of everything on screen, it does nothing that hinders the overall minute-to-minute gameplay. Now there's 3 ways to play the game in arcade mode: 1 player, 2 player, or 4 players at the same time, and let me tell you, this game gets absolutely insane to begin with, but as soon as you add 3 more players into the mix, the game is absolutely chaotic, which of course is a good thing. As you would expect, you come to possess a wide range of items and weaponry that will help you deal with the onslaught of enemies. There are plenty of options at your disposal, which all come together to help the gameplay become the real star of the show. Although it's quite expensive nowadays, GigaWing 2 is still worth the price of admission, and if you're not willing to drop that amount of cash, there is always the option of emulation. If you're a Capcom fan, you'll probably be aware of this little gem. Another arcade port, Cannon Spike is a love letter to fans of the company. It's set far into the future, where a rogue group of terrorist robots wreak havoc on the world and its citizens. The Anti-Robot Squad Special Forces has been created to overthrow these radical robots, and it sees you taking control as one of 6 characters, with an arsenal of weapons and a set of high-powered motor boots. These characters are from various franchises that make up the history of Capcom, with the game presenting itself as a multi-directional shooter, and it manages to be quite similar to Commando, a game released way back in 1985. Each character shares a standard shot weapon, which has a fast rate of fire and can work effectively from any distance. As well as this, there are several special abilities such as bombs, as well as a lock-on capability that allows your shots to fire towards enemies automatically. With how intense some of the fights get, you'll be relying on this mechanic quite often. Now the game pits you against a huge variety of foes, across several levels that are usually made up of 2 areas. In order to progress, you must take them all out, as well as a boss that appears at the end of each. The game is literally about shooting the hell out of everything on the screen, just pure shooting, and the only aspect I would say where the game fails is not including many extras from the arcade port, but with the game being so much fun, it is quite easy to overlook this aspect. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on new videos. Now I don't normally ask this, as it annoys the hell out of me, but due to YouTube's recent policy changes, your support on Patreon is now needed more than ever. Even as little as $1 a month will help keep the channel going for years to come. If that's something you're interested in doing, you'll find a link down below in the description. Well, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.